Hello everyone, I'm Kei-Nova. No, you aren't reading this wrong. This is my first non-game review, but don't worry. I've wanted to do something like this for quite some time, and I've always felt that the mecha subgenre was better utilized through Japanese animation. I have no idea why that is personally, but I suspect it might just be a societal thing. The obvious conclusion being that animation is usually not strictly for children in countries like Japan, while all of us grew up on Saturday morning cartoons aimed directly at children. Though I suppose there are channels featuring personalities more versed on that sort of thing. If you know my videos, I'm sort of a meat and potatoes sort of guy. I look at the exact subject at hand and not usually the ground it was made on. Oh, and before we begin, this video doesn't mark the end of gaming on this channel. No, just the birth of more varied content to keep things more broad and involved. If you'd like to see more of it, or possibly things like Mech model kit streams and reviews as well, just hit that like button and leave a comment. It's the best way to support the channel without expending currency of any sort. Though if you really want to speed up the process a little, the link to my completely optional Patreon is in the description below. Skin MADOX-01, and yes, that is how it's pronounced. Check out this commentary clip.
このマドックスっていうタイトルは、どういう意味なんですか？いや、単純に当時は語呂がいいな。
is an anime directed by Shinji Aramaki, who also conceptualized the project. While he was involved in a lot more of the obscure mech classics, such as the third part of Megazone 23, he also had a spanning career that touched the likes of everything from Genesis climber Maspida and Bubblegum Crisis to the modern Appleseed adaptations and even a more recent Blade Runner tie-in anime. Truthfully, he's contributed so much to not only mech animation but also more mainstream fares such as Full Metal Alchemist and even Soul Eater that it would likely take a full-length video just to get into all of that. However, as I do plan on checking out quite a few of the titles he's worked on, expect to hear the name Aramaki quite a bit. Now, MADOX-01 is in no way a shining example of storytelling, something I'll be getting into later on, along with the reasons why this is. However, it is a beautifully animated film that has all the scratchy hand-drawn animation you could ever want. And while that might seem like a negative to those who are used to more modern anime, whereas a lot of Japanese anime stylings have been smoothed out through modern tools and more streamlined processes, to us who grew up appreciating the rare grainy VHS copies we found here and there at rental stores, films like MADOX-01 are seen as gems strictly due to visual presentation alone. It's because of this visual presentation that ventures such as Animego have found success crowdfunding re-releases of titles such as Megazone 23 and of course MADOX-01. In fact, they were able to release a special edition oddly titled the Unobtainium Edition. And no, this series isn't related to James Cameron's Avatar in any way, though it does feature an exclusive patch and art book. Being eternally under a rock, I wasn't able to catch the crowdfunding campaign, and prices on eBay are less than reasonable, so I wasn't able to pick up anything more than the standard Blu-ray release. That being said, the crowdfunded version features a new transfer of the original film, alongside a widescreen cut approved by Aramaki himself. Animego has included their own dub, along with some fun extras for those who want to venture a bit outside the film. However, I'll be honest in saying that I don't personally listen to anything but the original Japanese dubs, so while I'd love to personally own something like that, I can live without it until I find some way to get a complete copy if I ever do. MADOX-01 begins with the titular power suit being put on display, pitted against a tank unit led by Lieutenant Kilgore. Unsurprisingly, the MADOX-01 makes quick work of the slower and more cumbersome tanks. Kilgore, being a tank operator, is rightfully upset, but even more so when he realizes that he's been bested by a woman. Yes, it's a bit of an unacceptable character trait in the 2020s, but let us not only consider the time in which this film was made, but also the fact that he's the villain of MADOX-01. If anything, it cements just how terrible Kilgore is. A rigid traditionalist tank operator? Well, duh, you're supposed to hate the guy. Almost immediately after the Maddox demonstration, the suit is lost. In a rather hilarious, yet entirely original twist, the suit isn't stolen or captured by anyone. On my first viewing, I didn't really think too much about this, but what exactly was the point in showing the driver falling asleep if the crash was caused entirely by the car's wheel popping? The MADOX-01 unit falls into a nearby truck owned by Onose, who just happens to be an acquaintance of our main character, Koji Sugimoto. He has a degree in engineering, spending his time working part-time on vehicles, which is why the unit is brought to him. Despite this, Koji's biggest concern is that Shiori, his ex-love, has made her way back to Japan, asking to see him again atop the MPR tower. In the background, the MADOX-01's original pilot Kusamoto and Kilgore express their desire to retrieve the unit. She wants to retrieve the MADOX-01 using a secondary unit, while he wishes to destroy it entirely. Apparently not really considering the fact that destroying the unit won't actually do anything when another unit is already on standby. All of this is pretty straightforward and expected. However, I found it almost hilarious that the military immediately assumes that terrorists have retrieved it. The possibility that it's been lost isn't even on their minds, and it's this mentality that sets up a lot of the later confusion seen between Koji and the military. Of course, it wouldn't be much of a movie if Koji didn't find himself overly curious about the MADOX-01. In another quite funny but unique twist, he literally reads the manual before finding himself accidentally trapped inside of it, though apparently forgetting to read the part about a release mechanism. So Koji finds himself in a dilemma. Go see his girlfriend with the suit on, or, well, never mind. He just decides to go straight for the NPR building wearing the MADOX-01. It ends up, for a movie called Skin Panic, there isn't actually all that much panicking going on. Yeah, if you haven't noticed, Koji, despite his educational history, is sort of an idiot. And it's his lack of forward thinking and refusal to explain himself that leads to every single battle in the film's second half. Of course, aside from that with Kilgore. This immediately leads to confusion with the military, who are rightfully upset that someone is ripping through city streets in a powered suit. But he must find Shiori, and so he fights through them, discovering that, yeah, the MADOX-01 is a dangerous thing. It's a straightforward affair, but I thought that it's odd that a scene depicting the suit's self-defense functions was even included. This really doesn't fall in line with anything else in the movie very well, as it implies that Koji could simply just sit there and let the MADOX-01's defense functions take control. All of the movie's further battles, which are exclusively those with Kusamoto and Kilgore, have you constantly wondering why exactly these functions aren't kicking in when Koji hesitates. But that's okay, because it's beautifully hand-drawn power suit battles that we're after here. And I'd say that the fight between both Maddox units is likely the best encounter in this entire film. It's here that a lot more of the suit's realism is shown, with Koji being inexperienced and not exactly capable of some of the feats that Kusamoto is in the secondary unit. Her only weakness during the battle boils down to an unwillingness to completely destroy the MADOX-01, as I'm pretty sure that if that had not been the case, Koji wouldn't have lasted 10 seconds. Again though, where's the self-defense system when you need it? After a prolonged battle, she decides to put an end to it. Not too difficult considering Koji is out of ammunition. However, she is moved by his absolutely ridiculous obsession with Shiori, notifying him that Kilgore really doesn't care who's in the MADOX-01 anymore. He just feels it's a threat to his occupation as a tank operator. Kusamoto would help out, but the leg mechanisms have gone out in her MADOX-02 due to the battle. Now, the battle with Kilgore isn't exactly the highlight of this movie. As I said, I personally feel that that was the theme with the MADOX-01. Despite his clear hate for technology that might replace his role as a tank operator, he's opted for a hover tank that isn't too far from a mech itself. It's odd because, if anything, this thing would just replace actual tanks if he succeeded in his mission. Most of this section has Koji climbing the tower as he's being chased before finally reaching the top, where Shiori and other citizens are. Look, I know the designs are really cool and that's what Maddox is all about, but I wasn't feeling this battle at all. But I do have to say that I loved how it ended. Finally feeling frustrated over the whole situation, something he probably should have felt much sooner, Koji finally finds the release mechanism for the MADOX-01 and sends both pieces of technology plummeting to the bottom floor. Ultimately, Kilgore's true fate isn't stated, but I'm sure it wasn't great. I particularly liked when both the hover tank and MADOX-01 were sitting, lingering on a frame of both units sitting motionless. I wonder if this was sort of a tease since neither are actually destroyed. It makes a lot of sense why people tie MADOX-01 to Bubblegum Crisis, as their survival likely could have led to some of the machines seen in that world. But that remains a fan theory, as there are no direct evidence or comments from the creators stating that this was the case, though many of them did go on to work on Bubblegum Crisis. Of course, it ends with Koji and Shiori meeting for a loving embrace, though in all likelihood she'd simply be terrified beyond belief and still reminiscing on her and Koji's failed relationship, but I suppose that does ruin the fun a bit, doesn't it? While MADOX-01 is incredibly straightforward and a bit underdeveloped if I was to be honest, it's important to note that not only is MADOX-01 only 40 minutes long, it's also part of a particular Japanese subgenre centered around design concepts. In terms of anime, it's along the lines of something like Dragon's Heaven, whereas the film had been created in order to express a mech design in greater detail through a short storyline. Within the Unobtainium Edition's notes, which were gratefully provided to me by one of my Patreons, Peter, thank Thank you, Peter. Aramaki states that he'd really just wanted to make interesting mechanical designs. MADOX-01 was his first film, and he was simply happy to make something in line with many American films featuring robots like Blue Thunder, Short Circuit, and The Terminator. Blue Thunder, though not exactly containing robots especially, seems to have influenced a lot of the action in MADOX-01, with a similar focus on sophisticated weaponry duking it out in the middle of a city. This particular style of film isn't at all exclusive to either mech design or animation. The films of Keita Amamiya, such as Mechanical Violator Hakaider or his Zerium series, all focus on bringing a particular character design to life. The intention is never to create a deeply involved storyline in any way, but instead just to bring something cool to life. And in that regard, MADOX-01 really hits the mark. It's short and simple, designed specifically to showcase the power suit designs, military technology, and really nothing more. Hell, even the included commentary reveals that the name MADOX-01 had no real meaning. It was just something cool to call the design. So what did you think of Metal Skin MADOX-01? For me, its animation outweighed the storyline by quite a bit, but I'm a sucker for gritty hand-drawn anime like this, so I didn't mind a bit. If you haven't seen it, I hope my review has perhaps inspired you to give it a go. It's especially good if you're a fan of mechs. Again, I've been Kei-Nova. Let me know how I did in the comments below, and if you'd like to see more videos like this. And if you happen to know any other mech or powered suit series and OVAs, and if you happen to know any other mech or powered suit anime you'd like to see on this channel, leave a comment below.